welcome to the Might Ramble podcast.
Ron, tell us about that.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest.
So, it's October 6, 2025. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on October 7th, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel. And ever since then, they've been fighting. They also fought at times before October 7th, 2023. The following conversation is a conversation with my dad. It's not some polished debate. It is a spontaneous, authentic conversation recorded in real time that was unplanned. No preparation went into it. So please take everything we say with a grain of salt. It's not meant to be scripture, just a starting point. After having this conversation with my dad, anything listed as fact as we were talking, I tried to go back and fact check. I don't have unlimited time, so my fact checking was AI based. And if you watch the video version of this conversation, you'll see text boxes pop up with more information regarding the validity of any of our claims, or just providing enhanced nuance or things that both my dad and I would ideally be aware of as just we were talking in real time. So yeah, I hope that grace and tolerance can be extended to the fact that I'm imperfect, my dad's imperfect, we're not experts on this topic. So if anything claimed, even with the fact checking, doesn't sit well with you, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to correct the record. I'm not trying to win an argument or a debate. I'm just trying to update my own map of understanding and enjoy a conversation with my dad. And at some point, I'll probably do a much more in-depth piece of writing regarding Israel, the Palestinians, perhaps just the Middle East in general. I'm not there right now, but this is a starting point, and I hope you enjoy. All right, Dad, what's the history of the Jews in Israel?
The Jews in Israel? Well, the Jews,
Yes.
I believe, the Jews were in Israel at the time Abraham promised Israel to the Jews. And then at some point later, I believe it was Joseph, went to Egypt to seek shelter from persecution. I don't know, maybe other Jews went, and they ended up multiplying a lot and ended up being enslaved by the pharaohs of Egypt. Ultimately, led by Moses, they escaped Egypt with God's help, the parting of the Red Sea, lived 40 years in the Saudi Arabian, desert, which time God brought the Ten Commandments to Moses, and he brought them down to his people. Moses led him to the River Jordan, but was told he would never cross. He died before he crossed, and he came across, and the Jews then were given permission or ordered to basically take Canaan, etc., and create the nation of Israel. It was a lot of death, killing, and whatnot. And then they lived there for about 1,300 years, in which time basically the Romans came to power and took over Israel as one of their territories. And after, I believe, a second insurrection, the Romans destroyed the second temple of Jerusalem. And basically the Jews were basically scattered. And they did not have a nation again until 1948, when the nation of Israel was recreated and accepted by other nations. Not all nations, but most. And that's kind of the history of the Jews in Israel. So they were there for many years, up until about the time of just after Jesus Christ died, just a modest number of years. Then they basically were scattered to throughout Europe and Western Asia, and then came back after well, they were coming back in the late 1800s, but then that really accelerated after World War I, and further accelerated a lot after World War II, when a lot of Jews decided to go back to Israel and or what was Palestine at that time, known as Palestine, under the British protectorate, and they formed the nation of Israel.
So retroactively here, do you think it was the right decision after World War II to allow a bunch of Jews to return to, I guess, what was Palestine? There were still some Jews there, though. That's my understanding.
Yeah, there were a lot that had come back starting in maybe the late 1800s, and they were buying territory and buying property and so forth. Well, it was problematic. Obviously, they have a lot of history there. From their perspective, they needed a nation to protect themselves instead of being scattered and continue to be persecuted, which they had been for literally a couple thousand years. And so they needed a nation that they could call their own and protect their own, as nations should. But it was never accepted by a lot of the people of that region, and governments of that region felt that should be, holy Muslim Islamic land, and the Jews were basically not allowed to be there. That's how they felt. So I don't know. I understand how it happened. I understand how it's problematic. I do understand why they'd have a claim to that territory going way back. But it has obviously been a big lightning rod ever since.
Yeah, what has it been like in your lifetime as far as, those two factions, both the Jews in Israel and then?
Well, I knew of the 67 war, but I was only 9 years old. The first thing that really struck me was in the 72 Summer Olympics in Munich, when Palestinian terrorists raided, a compound or whatever where Israeli athletes were staying, and murdered at least 7. I'm not sure. Really put a stain on the 72 Olympics. And the first thing I really heard a lot about Palestinian, and they were referred to in the West as terrorists. In other words, doing things to try to accomplish some end by scaring people. So that was the first thing I really knew about it. And I know that there was the 67 and I think the 72 or 73 wars, which each time Israel pretty much spanked whoever tried to go up against them, Egypt, etc., Jordan. In 48, they beat them to actually solidify their nation to begin with. So they are armed to the teeth for a small nation, and are bound and determined to keep their nation. And some of the fellow Arab nations, have accepted them. Others have not.
Gotcha. What was I going to say? I'm reading this book right now, actually, and it makes an interesting point in that we refer to, I don't know about what happened in the early 1970s at the Olympics. I think I've seen that before, but I've never really read too much about it. But we tend to refer to people of Islamic faith when they commit acts of violence. Sometimes in the West we refer to them as terrorists, like we refer to the people who did 9/11 as terrorists. But nonetheless, if Osama bin Laden had been in control of a government and done this very same thing that occurred on 9/11, we would say that that was an act of war, but we wouldn't declare that we're going into the war of war or war on war, right? Whereas because he wasn't in control of the government and 9/11 happened, we say that they are terrorists, and so we say we went and had a war on terror, right? But really, more so, they were following their faith in that they truly believed, if they self-destructed themselves in an attempt to harm people not of the Islamic faith, that is a direct route to heaven, that they don't even have to await judgment or anything. They go directly to heaven, right? So,
That's my understanding. I think there also was an understanding amongst those that committed the atrocities of 9/11 was that they would be immediately go to heaven and be met by, I don't know, was it 40 virgins or something of that nature. And there is, as I understand it, there is a sector of the Islamic religion, the radical sector, I suppose the radical right, that believes if you're not of their version of that faith, in other words, being another version of the Islamic faith or being not Islamic, is that you basically don't have a right to live. You're an infidel and you deserve to basically be slaughtered. And
yeah,
there's a
infidels.
sector that does believe, as I understand it, that the Islamic religion needs to take over the whole world. There's also a sector. There's the two, largest portion or largest groups of the Islamic faith that we hear of, the Shia and the Sunni. The Sunni being much larger, but the Shia dominate the population of Iran. There's a portion of those that believe that there really needs to be the apocalypse to bring forth the, 12th Mahdi who will bring peace to the earth. So there's a sector that, as we understand, that's why at least the West buys into that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, is not only for Israel's sake, but because it's believed that there's a portion of the clerics that basically are in control of Iran that believe basically they need to start a type of apocalypse, which the most obvious one would be a nuclear war. And of course, we like to think that those that are in control of nuclear weapons are at least rational actors, but that would obviously be outside that definition. So that's at least what the West has been told, part of it, and bought into some of the reasons to really be tough on Iran.
Yeah, I'm just learning more stuff about this, but I mean, so there's around 2 billion Muslims in the world, is my understanding. And although a small portion of them, truly believe in the idea of practicing jihadism, nonetheless, they are the only major world religion that has that particular sect within it, whereas if they commit violence against innocent people and give up their own lives in doing so, that is something to be cheered for and celebrated. And hence why the idea of a nuclear weapon getting into the hands of, say, a country like Iran, which is, very authoritarian and dominated by Islamic faith, right? Just could be a bad idea, that's for sure. But okay, next question. So in your lifetime, right, there's always been this strife between the Palestinians and then the state of Israel. And how long have you been hearing that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestine?
Well, certainly since, sometime after October 7th, you certainly heard a lot about it as Israel began to bomb, seemed like indiscriminately, portions of the Gaza Strip. That's certainly the case. Now, have been a lot of killings of Palestinians by Israeli soldiers, etc., before that, but not anywhere near the numbers that we're talking about now. And so I'd say really in the really big picture where it's become a serious worldwide matter is, if within a month after October the 7th, the bombings and so forth really picked up and lots of civilians, innocent civilians, including older people and children, were killed, the discussion of genocide has been out there and it's only intensified.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact number, but I think at this point it might be actually above or right at around 50% of the people suspected of being killed in Gaza on the Palestinian side since the October 7th attack are, women and children.
I wouldn't doubt that because
that
the
ratio was pretty
population of, if you think about the population of any group, particularly Palestine, which had a rapid growth in their population. There'd be a lot of children alone, and then half the adults were women. So there were thought to be over 10,000 Hamas fighters when this whole thing started. I don't know how many they believe they've taken out. I have no idea. Obviously Israel, those that are of the Netanyahu type, are the very strong belief that Hamas, literally the only way to get rid of the threat is to just totally eliminate them, which has kind of been the case in war before. You think about it's a different type of war, obviously, but you think about the defeat of the Nazi Germany and defeat of Imperial Japan. I mean, they had to be totally defeated, but not all the soldiers were killed, obviously. The leaders were tried, many of them executed, but they had to be totally defeated before that threat went behind. But that's a different group. They bought into, Germany had already had some experience with democratic type rights, voting rights, etc. Japan had not. It was really interesting. The United States went over to Japan and imposed a constitution on them. MacArthur did, and they bought in, and they've been an unbelievable success story in basically shifting and going from an imperial-led government with expansionist ideals to very much a democratic government and buy-in by their people, and a huge success story in many ways. But I don't know that with the history of the Palestinians and the Israelis that could ever be expected to work. But I do know in my own heart that unless you give a people some nationhood, there's always going to be a huge problem. If they clearly are a separate, distinct group and have had their own nation. Now, you can say, well, what about the Indians? That's true. But Netanyahu would maintain, I think, if you really asked him, that the Palestinians and the Israelis cannot live side by side as separate nation states. They can never trust it. But I'm not 100% sure of that. I think if they actually, I don't know how you'd impose it, but you have to keep the radicals like Hamas out, which actually were voted in by the Palestinian people in the mid-2000s. And then they, of course, took over and turned it into obviously what it became, including 450 miles of tunnels supposedly underneath it. And obviously, is one of their founding principles, the destruction of the state of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally in their charter, right, from the river to the sea, right, that they want to exterminate the state of Israel.
Yeah,
They also
but no one else wants to take the Palestinians in. You don't see any of the other Arab countries saying, we'll take you in and give you this chunk of decent land. I mean, so I don't know. The best thing, if you look at the Japanese, for instance, what really worked, a total change in mindset, but if you really looked at that, once they began to have their own vote and some success economically, the people didn't want to go back. They didn't want to go back to an imperialist government, an expansion-led government that was in constant war. See, they'd been into war a long time before World War II started. They went into, Chinese Manchuria, and it was constant where they were trying to take on territory. And I think their people were, once they began to see the fruits, they bought in.
My thing is, that's what someone brought up to me the other night. It's like, what would, the Palestinians be like if they were allowed to, one, leave their confines border-wise pretty easily, which they haven't been able to do for at least 20 years. And two, although they had a lot of aid between 2005 and 2023, I don't know exactly how that aid came in, and a lot of it was misallocated right, to Hamas coming into power and building their military infrastructure, right, namely all these tunnels and, say building their home base below a hospital and stuff like that. But what they were saying is like, let me back up here. Basically, if people were to stop shooting today and we just pumped, the Gaza Strip full of money and support and got these people education that wasn't, say teaching them that martyrdom was a good thing to aspire to, that the people would probably figure out a lot of it for themselves. But the issue is how do you get a group like Hamas, right, that literally has in their constitution that they want to, or whatever founding documents want to wipe out the state of Israel, and also has something like a governmental fund for people that go out and kill Jews, right, and die doing it, that, there's like a government fund that gets paid out to their families as like an award, right? So how do you get a group like that out of power without, stamping them out, I guess?
Well, I think that's what Netanyahu would maintain. Hamas has to be stamped out. That ideology has to be stamped out, and it can only happen with the stamping out of the militants first, and then you've got to restructure and a lot of education and indoctrination. Think about the people that were 16 years old at the time World War II ended and had been indoctrinated in Japanese, exceptionalism and Japanese imperialism and the decadence of the West, and on and on and on. I mean, it had to take quite a bit for that to change. Somebody had to come in and say, hey, we were misguided. And it had to come from people from Japan. It would have to come from that would get the respect and the buy-in from the people that were trying to re-indoctrinate. It had to be a big task, but yeah, and I don't know. It's a challenge. It's not impossible. Been done before. But you also have to have a people somewhere. It does help a lot if people, if you think about Christianity has been misused, obviously, but Jesus Christ himself said, if he hits you once on this cheek, turn the other cheek and give him that one too. It's a different religion, fundamentally, than just war, fight for everything. And I don't know how the people that are, have been brought up, for instance, in the Gaza Strip, what they've been taught, but I suspect it hasn't been much of turn the other cheek. I don't know. And Christians are willing to fight too, obviously, but it's a huge challenge.
There is not a doctrine. If you follow the Bible by the letter, at least the New Testament, there is no doctrine in there that says if you go out and kill innocent people that don't practice this faith, that it is a direct route to heaven to die.
No.
That's at least, there should be respect for different religions, but there are differences between religions, and I think to ignore that just for blanket respect of things you don't touch upon is also that's just patently false and bad. So yeah, I don't know. Did you guys make it back?
We are back. Yeah, I'm backed into the driveway here. Matthew went on in, so it's a nice night here. We got back in good time, so it's all good from that perspective. You must be sitting in the office there, huh? Or are you sitting? You're at the kitchen table.
Kitchen table.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you sitting at the side of the kitchen table or at the end?
Just at the end. I have like a thing where I can mount my phone up on.
Oh yeah. I can see you there. Is your shirt red or orange?
It's pink.
It's pink. Wow.
It's like salmon, like bright salmon.
Yeah. Cool.
So wait, where do you land as far as the Israel-Palestine war this time around, I guess?
Well, I believe that Israel has a right to exist. I believe they have to do what it takes to secure their right to exist. I do believe the Palestinian people need their own territory, and yeah, how that all gets worked out. You can't have 2 million people living in a strip of nothing, and other than just giving them aid to do nothing, how can they ever have a future? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if they're cut off and just packed in, that
yeah,
doesn't, of
no,
course, they're going to have, misgivings about that, right? As to how those misgivings are acted upon is, maybe perhaps a separate thing. But it is interesting too. I don't know if this is the Gaza Strip or just Palestinians in general in what is, now primarily the state of Israel. The
yeah,
population, though, was, I think it is the Gaza Strip. The population in 1948 of the Gaza Strip, in terms of Palestinians, was like 250,000. And
yeah.
I don't know where it stands today. Your death tolls
It's
are going
2
to vary
million.
as far as
I think it's 2 million.
estimates. I think it's
2
around 2
million.
million though, right? So that's
Yeah,
in times
incredible. Yeah,
times the 1948 population by
yeah,
8, and we're at
yeah.
where we're at today. And part of that is, right, there are just more people in the world, but that rate of growth in terms of citizens in that area, it's triple the world average over that time. So
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know, like I'd have to look at the actual definition of genocide, but like when people accuse Israel of that, I'm always like, well, wait a minute, right? They're committing genocide, and a lot of people would say they were committing genocide before October 7th as well, from what I've seen. And I'm like, if they've been committing genocide for like decades and stuff, like what? They must not be very good at it if the population has increased
Oh
at
yeah.
triple
There.
the world rate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I don't see what they're trying to do. It is so hard if you go into house to house combat with people, the soldiers. It's so dangerous, so hard. So they've been trying to, but obviously they've got a lot of informants inside the Gaza Strip that are getting paid, probably Palestinians that are getting paid to get them information where they believe some of the Hamas people are at, and they're bombing them and whatnot. But unless you literally put foot soldiers on and go and route them all out and down those dangerous tunnels, you'll never get them all out of there. It's like cats and rats. I mean, you got to send the big cats after the rats so they get exterminated. But that Hamas is what I would do, I think, and maybe they have this. I mean, I take the example of Japan. I would simply go ahead and, whether the rest of the world goes along or not, I would, if I were Israel with the support of the United States, I would simply say, you have your own nation, but here's your constitution, period. And but what they want to do is get other countries to form a peacekeeping force in the Gaza Strip. But if I'm Israel, I still have to maintain, for at least a period of years, the right to come in and clean house if I need to. You're never going to get it where you get the people of the Gaza Strip to buy into anything other than what the masters say, Hamas or whatever. I'm sure a lot of people resent Hamas, but I think you've got to impose a constitution. You got to have an enforcement mechanism too on that, so you can begin to re-educate. And it's indoctrination, so you can end up with hopefully a peaceful nation. I mean, there was a time when you go back and look at the Bible, you had the Jews and you had the Philistines. Now, I'm assuming that the Philistines were some of the predecessors to the Palestinians. I don't know that for sure, but they're going to have to get along side by side unless one party completely moves out, and I don't see that happening.
yeah, I I don't know. Ideas are notoriously hard to kill, right? But what was I going to say? I also don't get, I get why the border has been so tight between, say, Egypt and the Gaza Strip and Israel and the Gaza Strip. And I don't know if maybe Jordan occupies a little bit of that border up top. Not sure. But, when you're dealing with the threat that anyone that comes across the border, right, may be a suicide bomber, right?
Yeah.
That changes the calculus of things a lot
Yeah.
in terms of probably how strict you're going to be, just as we saw, in the wake of 9/11, what happened to airport security. Things got a
Right.
hell of a lot more strict, right? Uh, so I get that, but I don't get why, what do I say? Can't you say, okay, if you're innocent in Gaza and you're not helping Hamas, you're not supportive of them, come to this checkpoint. We will find a way to, as safe as possible, search you to make sure you're not going to blow us up. And then let's get you across the border to one country or another into a space of some sort, which will not be at war, right? You would hope for good conditions, but at least get them out of, the areas that can be bombed. And I think, I don't know why that can occur. I do know, I think based on what I have learned or read about at times, is that Hamas, actually in some ways won't, let's say Hamas is firing rockets off of a hospital, they won't let certain people evacuate certain groups of civilians, right? Because they know if Israel responds to what they're doing, that they're going to kill innocent people, right? And then that portrays very poorly on Israel.
Right.
So I don't know how universal that type of thing is, but I know there is some of that going on. But still, you would think that there would be some way to get more innocent people just at least out of the danger zone, so to speak. But
Yeah, I thought about that too. And of course, everything we talk about here, Mitchell, is only based on what we hear or read. And so we're so limited, we're not on the ground over there and really with the people and observing it firsthand and trying to, even if we could, trying to make sense of what's really going on. So we have our thoughts, but they're also limited based on what we have access to or what we were willing to go out and get access to. That's the interesting thing about it.
Yeah. My other question is, why does the U.S. have such a unique relationship with Israel? Aside from, okay, in the wake of World War II, the U.S. becomes the preeminent world superpower, right? That's getting more contested, and that our world is changing quite a bit right now. But nonetheless, that was the case for at least 70 years, right? And Israel is the only Jewish state in the entire world that was founded in the wake of World War II. And so I get, probably why, and Israel, however imperfect it is, and it's very imperfect, there's corruption and differing views there as far as, how maybe they want to treat the Palestinians, and, Netanyahu says wanting to stay in power through continuing a war because he's got all these, corruption stuff on the back end that he probably needs to be held to account for, even besides this war. But however imperfect Israel may be, it still is one of, if not the only, democratic society in the Middle East.
Yeah,
I think that's correct.
And that is why that is at least officially the reason that we support them so heavily, is they are the only truly democratic institution or nation in the Middle East. And so that at least has been the official rationale behind our support. See, you got to remember that really after World War II, it's quite clear that we were both the industrial leader and the military leader of the world. And we made a very determined effort to support democratic institutions around the world. And part of that was economic, because then we could trade with them. So Israel would fall, albeit they're quite small, would fall into that category. I often think back about some of the things in the formation of our nation that happened that allowed the United States, at least twice, Washington and his troops, by just no small miracles, were able to escape the Brits and had the Brits, taken Washington down, that would have been the end of that revolution. And I often think
Yeah, it's
about
really desperate times now, for sure.
why did that happen? Was it divine providence? And if it was, why? Was it simply for the establishment of the United States of America, or was there something even beyond that? Could it have been that, and I've never even seen anybody even say this, could it have been so they would be the protectorate of the nation of Israel? I don't know, but I asked that question to myself many times. Because without the United States, Israel would not exist. It would have been demolished time and again because they wouldn't have all the weapons and the support that they have.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they are cutting edge. They're ahead of us on some stuff at this point militarily. They're much
Yeah.
smaller, but just in terms of some of their sophistication on certain things. But what else? But has the U.S.'s relationship with Israel been this unique for all of those 75 years, or like has it kind of waxed and waned, or has it like
Well, we were
crescendoed
one of
over
the, if we weren't the first, we were one of the first after they declared their own nation, the nation of Israel. We were one of the first to recognize that nation. That is for sure. And so all during my time, we were always a big supporter of Israel. We weren't always, we didn't always agree with all of its actions, and including right now, we don't always agree, including officially, we don't always agree with all of its actions. But we have always been a huge supporter of Israel. And yeah, that has been to the criticism, or subject to the criticism of a part of the United States citizenry. But that, I think, it has to do with the fact that it is the only truly democratic institution in the Middle East is the reason that we support it. We've tried, to get democratic institutions installed elsewhere. We had one that was not fully, the Shah of Iran, but that was more of a, what
that was
they
like
would
in the
call
70s, right?
But clearly we tried with Iraq to establish a nation state there. We tried to in Afghanistan, but we've learned that you can't just through sheer will establish a nation state in all these countries. That's what's amazing about like Japan, or a democratic nation state in all the countries. That's what's amazing about Japan, because they didn't really have any history of it, yet we were successful in doing that. I don't know if it was just the circumstances, the demolishment that they took in World War II. There's some that would say, without a complete destruction of your enemy, you never win. And that.
Well, I mean, yeah, if say for example, different enemies, but I know for example, like World War II, if we thought that the cost of innocent civilians dying was too, reprehensible of us or morally wrong to proceed in fighting the Nazis, right? We'd all be under the Reich that they wanted to build at this point, right? Like sometimes you do have to fight.
Yeah. Or accept what's going to happen if you don't. Interesting, World War II, supposedly about 60 million people were killed in World War II.
Oh, a ton. Yeah.
Unbelievable number. And I think, I want to say at least half were innocent civilians. Now, the United States lost a lot of people. It's still only 500,000. I mean, who lost the people? And the Soviet Union lost the most. They had a ton of people that died. Germany lost a lot, but I mean, Soviet Union, I don't know, was it total between citizens and military 11 million or more, maybe more than that? I mean, it was huge.
You want to talk about what really baffles me is, it just boggles the mind, is the Soviet Union, right, fights in World War II. We get Germany put down. And then a lot of those soldiers, as they came back into the Soviet fold, right, they were taken to the gulags, or like these internment camps, and just treated horribly, many times even to the point of death, because, it was in the midst of Stalin's power, and he was really uncomfortable. For a variety of reasons, but very uncomfortable with the idea of a bunch of people going out into Western culture and getting exposure and then bringing that back in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always insane. Imagine fighting in World War II and coming home to that. That's always terrible. But the other thing, and yeah, I'm not saying like, I don't know what the answer is between Israel and the Gaza Strip, but particularly Hamas. I guess I just don't know how do you get that if that group's not willing to concede control and to let
Well, they're not going to be, because they're nothing without having that control. If you're Israel, you only really have one choice. You have to get rid of Hamas, because if you don't, they're always there and they're always going to be indoctrinating
they'll
the
just
young.
come back. They've
Yeah,
said
they'll
again and
just come
again.
back. It's like a cancer to Israel. They have to do that. And Hamas, while the peace offer is lay your arms down and do it, they may get most of those young people to do that. I don't know, but they've got to give them something productive to do. They can't have them languishing in poverty after that. You got to have something for them to buy into and get them engaged in something other than, the indoctrination that they've had with Hamas. It's a real big challenge. It can be done, but it can't be done halfway.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm learning about this stuff. But one argument that was made to me was like, well, yeah, the maps, right? If you've seen between like the state of Israel and Palestine, how Israel has shrunk the map for the Palestinians,
Yeah.
immensely
Mhm.
since 1948. I don't know all the history there, but obviously just looking at that map, that seems like something's not quite right, to just be pulling people out of there or pushing people
Yeah.
back out of the land that they were
Oh
in.
yeah, it's been terrible for the Palestinians. Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's no, I mean, it's like what we did to the Indians in some sense
Yeah.
is what it
Oh,
looks like.
exactly. It's just brutal.
Um,
Yeah.
but in regards to the Gaza Strip, I've had the argument made to me, well, you take any culture and you pin them down, into a really small region and don't allow them, you know, like aid and just the ability to have like a well-functioning society because
Hmm.
you're so strict on their border that anyone or any culture might be prone to say like suicide bomber attacks or like
Oh yeah.
strapping their children up as
Yeah.
bombs. And I don't know if that's entirely true. I mean, I can see the
Yeah.
rationale there, but that argument there is saying that say strapping children up with bombs and having them go and kill soldiers, that is exclusive to Gaza, and that's very much not, right. That's
Yeah.
like
I
you've
I
seen
would
that time and
I would
time
guess you're
again
right.
with jihadist groups, right. Like there's stories from Iran of they didn't have enough tanks, to make it through the minefields or to be able to clear the minefields and lose any tanks. So what they did, I can't remember when this was. It was some type of war Iran was in, definitely in the last 70 years. But what they would do is take groups of young boys, right, and they would tie them up in ropes in groups of 20. They put them in ropes so if any of them got scared, they couldn't get out. And they would have the boys, right, walk across the minefield to clear the mines for
Oh boy.
the military, right? And just these types of things, though, it's like there's only one part of one religion that is doing that type of stuff, and it's not exclusive to Gaza, right? And so I don't know. It's
Well, Israel had a lot of, before the nation was formed, there was a lot of terrorist activity. Some of their future political leaders were terrorists, and trying to, do things that would cause those in power, which I think was basically the British protectorate, to, give up what they were doing and obviously allow the nation of Israel to be formed. So yeah, all peoples will always seek self-determination. I mean, that's the history of the world, and
yeah,
that's just their natural inclination. Groups want to determine their own future, and they want to determine it with like-minded, like-backgrounded people. That's what's so unique about the United States. It's a whole mixture. That's what's so important about keeping that ideal alive and really promoting it. And one of the things, I met with Bobby Kaufman, who's the Iowa State House of Representatives majority leader. He's not the Speaker of the House. Chuck Grassley's grandson, Pat Grassley, is. But he's the second in command of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, if you may, for the state of Iowa. I said I want to go meet with your dad, but one thing I want to talk to this dad about on the nation side, I think about all the people that fought and died or were wounded or certainly risked everything to help us be where we're at today. And I think about us frittering it away with a few things: our finances, number one. Number two, not promoting. It doesn't have to be strict indoctrination. We need to have a free flow of ideas, but any successful organization needs to promote its good qualities among its people, particularly the young. You have to give them reason to buy in. You do. You just have to. If all they hear is bad things about it, why do they think it should continue? And I think about all the people that fought and died so the United States could exist and be a beacon of freedom. You know, how many nations in the world have the type of freedom of speech, supposedly, that we do in our Constitution? A lot of Western Europe doesn't. If they don't, I got to think a lot of countries don't. You know, we have our freedom of religion, freedom of the speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of assembly. And, you know, a lot of countries don't have that. A lot of people died. You know, if you think about the men that came across the British Channel on D-Day, and they're ready to get out of what were those half boats, whatever they called it, the things folded down. You remember Saving Private Ryan? The guys jumped out. Huh?
U-boats?
Well, U-boats were what the Germans had, the subs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so, I mean, right there, they were under fire. But then some of the missions that they had to go through, just right there alone, to take out those concrete bunkers that the Germans were firing out of up above the
shore. Yeah.
You know, each of the rock walls. I mean, some of those were literally suicide missions where none of them made it, or only 1 out of 20 would make it. And you knew going in, you weren't any better than those boys in Randall, except you were fighting for something. Now, you're going to fight for your fellow soldier, and that's probably first. Fight for your own life as best you could. For your fellow soldier, you don't want to let them down. But then you also had something to buy into. You had to buy into that. And I think, how in the world aren't we doing better at continuing that ideal those people fought for? How can we just give it away and let the Chinese, for instance, say we don't have to do anything? They'll implode on their own. I really think we got to get our finances in order. We need to do a better job educating our young people and teaching them not what to think, but how to think, and teaching them the good things and the ideals of the country. Yet admitting we've had some flaws we're working on, we're continuing to work on. And then lastly, we got to get control of this nonsense of the internet that's, you know, the algorithms and so forth that are pumping some of our people into oblivion and selling ads for it. I don't know what all they're doing, but we got to,
where it's profitable. Yeah.
We got to claim some of it back. We don't have the challenge that Israel has with Hamas and the Palestinians, but we have a challenge. And I can't believe we're not working harder to not give that away. And all the while, we've let our two political parties become increasingly radicalized and controlled. They said, I was reading something today that up until about 1980 or into the early 1980s, that at least 60% of Congress would have easily been categorized as moderates. But it began to really change, and the parties began to change, and the people that would get elected in the primaries became increasingly only those that were more radical. Radical right in the case of the Republicans, radical left in the case of the Democrats, and we have only really a very modest percentage of true moderates in Congress now, and that's why they can't agree on anything. So we're fighting all these, what I'm going to call them range wars, just fighting against ourselves instead of fighting for bigger ideals. We got to have some range wars. We're not always going to agree what what their role should be, and the size of it, etc., and how we should pay for it. But we shouldn't be spending all of our time on range wars and forgetting about some of the ideals that our country was formed upon or formed after, and just letting it all go by the wayside just foolishly.
What do you mean by range wars?
Well, a range war, you and I could sit at a bar Mitch, and
I'd be
we
getting
could,
water, but
yeah, well, that's fine, but we could decide, I'm going to get Mitchell so drunk he falls off his stool, and you're going to get me so drunk I fall off my stool. And at the end of the day, what have we accomplished? None of us win. We just fall off our stools.
have a worse
And
day tomorrow.
yeah, and to me, that's what we're doing. We're fighting a lot of senseless stuff because we're allowing our political parties to somehow the primary process is causing, the people that I think we need to get more people involved in the primary process and really promote the idea of compromise. We have to have our standards, but we have to understand politics is compromise if it's to be successful. It can never be successful unless you got just one party rule without compromise. It can't be. So we're over
Yeah,
here, we ought to be sitting at the bar. Maybe we got a great business proposition, and we could really make something go or do something great for our community. But we're sitting back here pissing around trying to get the other guy drunk because we don't like his ideas and just get him to fall off the bar stool. And
yeah. I mean,
we both fall off the bar stool.
I think as the status quo, the idea of being politically successful with your constituents through hating the opposite side,
Yeah,
preaching of the
yeah,
opposite side, like
yeah.
that should not be a very common phenomenon
No.
amongst our elected officials, where they just say horrible things back and forth about one another, and that shit
Right.
just goes on and on. Right? There are times where I think you got to call spades spades, but I don't know. I always wonder just, I imagine most people when they get into politics, and maybe I'm wrong, I've never gotten into politics, but I always think most people when they get into politics are probably well intentioned. Like they get into it for the right reasons. They think that however they're viewing the world, right, that they can do a good job representing it and they think it's for the best. And I imagine they at least aspire to be ethical, right, as they initially get into politics. But then somewhere along the way, by the time they actually come into power, they're all pretty much corrupt. Not always, but there is some level of corruption going on with all of them. So I'm like, what are the mechanisms there by which that happens, and why is it that way? And I also think studying someone, regardless of what you may think of his views, but like take Bernie Sanders, for example. Let's discard the age discussion regarding our politicians, but Bernie's been in national politics for a long, long time. And I think he's an independent, if I recall correctly.
He does. He officially lists himself as an independent. Yeah.
But studying like how he's been able to maintain his ability to, studying how he's been able to stay in office despite being very much his own person and not formally, I guess, affiliated with one party or the other, right? Like taking someone like that, like how do we find more people like that? And also
Yeah.
conversely, where are the normal people in Congress? Not maybe the most normal, as far as most people don't aspire to be that level of politician, or are they capable of being good enough with the public and stuff like that to find themselves in a position to be elected? But people that are just willing to get up on occasion and say, hey, here's what I thought about this issue, and then I saw this piece of information or talked with this person and I changed my mind, no longer think what I used to think, right, in the face of new evidence. People just get so stonewalled into their corners, right? And it's just like I really can't think of any example off the top. Yeah, I don't know. Where are the people willing to change their minds?
Yeah. Well, that's being willing to listen to what others say instead of just trying to talk over them. And the one thing that we can do, though, if we can get it passed as a constitutional amendment, is again put term limits on our elected officials at the national level.
All right, keep going.
Well, we do need constitutional limits on term limits, so people don't get in there and think, well, I can just make a whole career out of this. I just have to keep, making sure that I don't miscue from a position on something that I would get primaried out. That's the start. A lot of these people that lose their positions because they're moderate, they get primaried out by their own party, because they don't support something that's radical enough from their own, to get supported by the people that show up at the primaries to vote.
Yeah, I mean, just take
Which
Trump, for example, right? Not that he probably made he most definitely didn't make the most cogent arguments, I would imagine, in the 2016 election, aside from saying politics are corrupt and I'm not a politician, elect me. But nonetheless, he screamed the loudest, right, and was the most entertaining, right? We're very much wired to notice people that stand out in one way or another from a group that we tend to associate certain things with. So if someone really doesn't fit the mold compared to their competitors, right, and they're like loud and boisterous, we tend to notice that much, right?
Right.
And that's for better, well, can be for better or for worse, but perhaps it looks like the most attractive candidate because we notice them the most, and then it's only as we become more familiar with them, right, that we can see just how errant they are in their ways. But I don't know where I'm going with all this.
Well, we do need term limits. There's no question. There's no reason people need to be in there so long. And once they begin to see, I can make a longer term career and I can enrich myself, especially if I've got inside information and I can make stock trades and so forth on it. As I see legislation develop in committees and so forth, the bottom line is that they can enrich themselves greatly if they can hang on to their seat. And maybe they like the lifestyle of being a politician too, but they're not, they don't fit the original intent, as I understand it, of those that formed the original Constitution, that we would have citizens agree to come in and represent their district or represent their state for a period of time and then go back and do what they did before. It wasn't designed for people to go in and make a career out of it. And that's been a big problem. In order to get reelected, though, they have to take more radical positions, or they have to be of that mindset to begin with, so they don't get primaried out.
Yeah, and
the term limit thing is doable. That is doable, I think. But you can have a constitutional convention, but we've never had a constitutional convention, as I understand it. So we don't even know really how it would go. So generally felt that if you're going to have an amendment to the Constitution, you've got to get it passed by the requisite majorities in both the House and the Senate, and then it's got to be approved by at least 3/4 of the states. So it's got to generally felt that instead of a constitutional convention, it needs to be passed in Congress first, and then put back forth before the states to ratify. But I think the problem with it, because that has to start in Congress, you have so many people that are dependent upon
vote against themselves. Yeah.
No. So, I mean, the only real way to do that, probably get it passed, is to make it effective some years down the road. We'll oppose what we think's right for 100 years down the road, but that's too late. That won't work.
People in until X date.
If you made it for more than 20 years down the road, when most of them could see that I'm going to be out of politics anyway, you might get it, but that's a long time to have to wait in the meanwhile for these people to stay in there and enrich themselves. And I don't know, maybe the primary process needs to change somehow, some way. I don't know. I think it still starts back with an educated populace. The best way to get control of a populace is to have a bunch of people that don't have a clue what's going on. And they don't even understand how government is designed to work, let alone works. We got a lot of people that don't even truly understand the three branches of our federal government.
Oh, no, for sure. I forget what these polls are. It's pretty bad.
And that's basic government. We have that in 11th grade. That's basic government. And we have some people that, that's probably the only real government that I ever got. We have people that are high school graduates that understand that very well because they gave a damned, and then they were lifelong learners as well. But other people didn't care, blew off the class, haven't really cared. They maybe want to espouse their opinion once in a while, but they don't even really understand the roles of the three branches to begin with, and how they're supposed to really act as a check and a balance on the other branches.
Yeah, I think the thing is too, kind of on a tangent here, but as to the value of an educated populace and what that can do as far as being able to implement effective change in a society, especially a democratic society, what is, one of the first steps that typically happens when a very authoritarian government really, really seizes power, if we look at some of the examples of the 20th centuries, is they take out, right, the academics and the intellects.
Oh yeah, you wipe out the
and
people at the
really able to
educations. Yeah. You
really
wipe
make
out
and
the
understand
academics, you
power.
wipe out the attorneys. Yeah, you wipe them out, and you end up with a lot less educated populace where you can manipulate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's something I definitely think about. But and I think I said earlier something about like where are the people willing to change their mind, and I guess it's not entirely true in the sense of we do have politicians that will flip flop, their stance on a given issue, right? But it's not always the most trackable as to why they're doing it. It seems usually they do it because it's whatever prior stance they used to have is no longer popular with their voters, right? So they change to what they think will play better with their voters rather than some
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
rounded intellectual rational reasoning as to why their stance has flipped besides just staying in power or getting power. So
Well, I think Donald Trump would be a pretty good example of that. I mean, at one time he was a registered Democrat, as I understand it. He would have been very much in favor of abortion, but he realizes his base in the Republican Party is his strongest base is the religious right, and of course they're very much opposed to abortion and so on and so forth. So he hasn't really espoused it a ton, but he's changed his position on it clearly because he's placating to his base.
yeah, I mean, and even the shorter term, during his campaigning, it's all about, not all about, but one of the things he promised to do. Did he promise it or someone else promised it? Someone within there promised it, though, that they were going to get the Epstein files out, and Trump definitely spoke to that effect, right? And then now that he actually has power, he's like, these things aren't coming out.
All right. You knew there's something in the woodpile there. Yeah.
Also, the strangest thing to me in that, so the religious right, I don't know, religious right, there's, I don't know if Christian nationalism is a separate thing or not. There's probably a lot of overlap there. But
yeah,
for all of the people to represent them, Donald Trump is not a very Christ-like man.
He's one of the oddest, partners, or they're an odd couple. Yeah, I mean, really. But the religious right has seen that Donald Trump, for all of his flaws, is their best ticket at this time to accomplish some of the objectives they want to accomplish. I mean, he is their ticket, and he's been willing to be their ticket. It's an odd set of partners. Bedfellows, as they call them. What's that?
It is like the strangest.
Yeah.
Just horrible.
Yeah.
Pairing of what a Christ-like figure would hopefully be versus what Donald Trump is.
Yeah, in many ways, Donald Trump, by many standards, would appear to be a very poor version of a human being.
He might be the most prolific liar in terms of
God, from all standards, treatment of women, you could go up and down, but he is the one that has the ability to rally people. And once he decided to rally for some of the causes that his best base, the evangelical right, have wanted for a long time, I mean, they were a match. Strange bedfellows, but they continue to be a match. And I think how the religious right, particularly evangelicals, they just view him as he is a vehicle to their end, and imperfect as that, but still he is their vehicle. And maybe as God intended it, period. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay, we can be done. I'm just trying some stuff out, but.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, good discussion. Yeah, when that hits the what is it, the whatever bestseller list.
I probably have to make some claims in terms of some things I don't know what I'm talking about, so please grant me some
Well,
grace.
all these things, Mitchell, unless you really become quite a student, you got a lot of background, like with chemistry and so forth. But so much of this, again, we can have opinions, but we only know what's been reported or we otherwise dig out.
Yeah, we're not in the rooms, right?
And we're trying to sort out fact from fiction if we're trying to be honest with ourselves and others. But still, the news is what the media decides to report, whether that is the historical media or whether that's the social media, whatever. It's what is people decide to report and people pick up on.
Yeah.
It was really interesting the other day. I was listening to this thing about this Ian Roberts, the superintendent from Des Moines.
Oh, Des Moines, yeah, I saw that.
And really interesting on CNN. It's come out, and I think it's correct, that the Des Moines School Board, before he ever came in as superintendent, found out that he did not have a doctorate from that 2007, 2008 era. Was that at Morgan State? I'm not sure. But they hired him anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, but they hired him anyway. I need to look at that further, but I believe that's the common thought right now. CNN, when they were going through what his background was, or this whole situation out there, they just conveniently left out that, which I thought that is a big piece. They talk about the school board being misled and whatnot. They just freaking conveniently misled that supposedly the school board knew this and still hired him.
I think they also knew that I forget what the exact thing was. It's like he had lost his status in the U.S., but he was still eligible to work in the U.S. for a certain number of years, despite having lost, I don't know. I need to look more at this information, but there was something else they knew as well that would seem strange to still hire him as a superintendent, that's for sure. And as far as leaving that piece of information out, I mean, even aside from him being, I think currently he's still in custody, but let's say he ends up getting deported. Even aside from what's going on with ICE and deportations, to hire a superintendent that lied about his education, as far as I think having a terminal degree that usually comes with the territory, I would imagine, for a superintendent role that big.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like that's crazy. So
well, and if that's true, obviously that school board, every member of the school board that voted to hire him, if it's true that they did know that he lied about a material piece of his resume, they should all be voted out. Obviously, I mean, people that have no more morals and no more common sense than that, to know that somebody would lie about something so important, you can't trust. You cannot trust. They're a liar, and they don't value honesty, and they'll lie just to mislead you to help create a better, impression of them. And apparently he has other things. Was he charged at one time for trying to conspire to drugs? I don't know. He's had a number of issues. I don't
know about drugs.
This whole issue with the firearm, he's got a big problem on his hands because he had a firearm on him, or firearms.
Well, not even that. They also had a school policy or whatever where you can't have a gun right on their campus. So big issue there. But he had a
well, he was picked up. He wasn't authorized to have a gun. He has some restriction against him having guns. So he's got a federal weapons charge, I believe, against him now.
That is right. He has a prior weapons charge against him too, but that one's kind of misleading because he was just like hunting or something, and I forget what the exact details was, but it was pretty innocent. Almost no cop would have given him the ticket or charge that he ended up getting in that situation, just considering he was hunting. It was in like Pennsylvania or something, but I forget the exact details. So.
Yeah. Now, he'll be deported. The question will be, will he be imprisoned first for a while? That'll be the question. He'll be lucky if he's just deported back to Guyana. You know,
Yeah, I don't know.
his career has been shot completely in the ass, but he did it to himself. You know.
Why does the U.S. why would they even want to keep him here though? Like,
Well, I don't know if they, if you think about imprisonment, part of it is punishment. It's to have a just result for somebody that broke the law. If you really think about it, if somebody goes out and murders somebody, forget about the death sentence. Just think about imprisonment. Part of it is to keep them off the streets, true, but part of them is to have to face the consequence for what they did. So if he broke laws, simply sending him back to Guyana, maybe felt that's not a just deserve. He deserves to actually face more of a consequence for what he did.
yeah, I can see like, say I don't know, who was the Ukrainian refugee that got killed on the train.
Oh, the girl. Yeah.
And the person who did it was severely mentally
ill. Yes.
Right. But let's say he hadn't have been mentally ill and he was here illegally. I don't even know what all the facts are. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Yeah. I got you.
I can see as a society why there might be an impetus to what you did was so horrendous and reprehensible, heinous, that, to show that we are a just society, we will punish you here. I can see that, but for, say, this Des Moines superintendent, regardless of whether he might have a weapons charge, I don't think what he did is so heinous. Right.
No, not the lying isn't an imprisonable issue, I don't think. But
there's like tiers of
if there's a weapons charge, and it would be standard for a U.S. citizen to get, a year in prison for it, I don't see why he should just be, even though it's going to cost the U.S. society, I don't see why he should be given a free ticket just to go back to Guyana. I think he should pay, for his crime.
Shouldn't the U.S. society just get a pick? Do we want to pay for this?
Well, but it's not a vote. It's going to ultimately be up to the prosecuting attorney to prosecute him or not, versus just have ICE deport him, and then finally be up to the judge or the jury. But for me, not that I'm vindictive, but I think you have to have a fair application of the law. And it should be fair whether or not they're U.S. citizens or not. They broke U.S. law, they should face the consequence. We would expect our citizens that went abroad and broke another country's law. One of the problems is many times they don't know the law, but we would expect them, if we had a U.S. citizen and violated a weapons law in Italy, for instance, we wouldn't expect them just to be sent back to the United States and not face the consequences like an Italian citizen would. Why shouldn't they?
I mean, that's not always true, though. Take someone like Brittany Griner, right, who got caught with weed going into Russia. And, I mean, she certainly did pay a price, but we didn't let her pay Russia's full price, right? We traded over
she became, she was a political pawn to begin with. And it was a political move to get her out, so you can debate that one at some level. But to the United States, it would seem like that's an excessive. She made apparently an innocent mistake, and no one was harmed. It seemed like excessive punishment, so they went to bat for her. They went to bat for her. This is different. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's always there will be certain ways to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a vindictive person, but I think you have to have a fair application of the law. And just because they're a U.S. citizen versus not, I don't think just because you're not that you should automatically escape whatever the consequences would have been if you were a U.S. citizen. I don't think they should get any better. I'm watching this cat across the street. He keeps coming across. He tries to get in my garage. I keep having to close the garage door. Matthew came out and went back. Then there's this coon that keeps coming over, and he goes down in the sewer across the street in front of that 3-story house over there. Man, is he fat. Huh? He's really a fat coon. Well, he'll sneak back and forth. He'll go out to this cornfield out there. Obviously, he'll eat some corn. Then he'll come back and stay down underneath the sewer. I've seen him stay underneath the sewer, go in these sewers before. But he's out in that cornfield so he can get all that corn and get fat. And I don't know whether they hibernate in the winter or not. I don't know what coons do. But it's so funny. He can barely fit down. He's so fat, he can barely fit down into the sewer. He really has to wedge himself down in there.
You should get him some Ozempic.
Yeah. Well, if he gets stuck, he's just going to stay there for a while until he thins down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if he gets too lonely in the house in Iowa, we can bring on the raccoon, the cat. It's probably time.
But I like to keep my garage door closed so he's not in my garage prowling around. He'll get into the doggone garbage and he'll make a mess out of that. And, it's always interesting. Little animals.
Right, I gotta hop off here.
All right. Well, good talking to you tonight, Mitchell. Again, thank you for all your help. Okay. We'll see you later.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.